Hello and welcome to this edition of MTG Reads. I'm DP, author, MTG fan and voracious reader, here to guide you to some of the very best of the written word on Magic the Gathering. Been quite a quiet week this week with only 146 articles online that were written, and that's mainly because Double Masters has been released and is behind us. We're still a month or so away from Zendikar Rising. This weekend, as I record this, we've got the Command Fest online and announcements about Commander Legends and Commander Green, so I suspect that next week we'll pick up a bit on the Commander side. But for now, articles have been fairly varied, taking inspiration from the various things that have come about. And one of those has been the release of Amonkhet Remastered on Arena. And that's very much the case for Jana Amri's article on Channel Fireball. She does a fair bit of analysis, taking a look at each of the cards that is being released under the Amonkhet Remastered and how they will impact the various decks within the historic meta. She's looking at what cards will get shoved out and how these new cards will replace them. It's a fairly standard look at a new release for Channel Fireball, but it is Jana Amri's very first article for them, and I can see very much how she fits in with their style and why they've signed her up. Kristen Gregory over at Hipsters of the Coast takes a different slant on the inspiration from Amonkhet Remastered and asks the question, why do we feel so nostalgic about Amonkhet when it's a release of only 3 years ago? She identifies the fact that it was a period when there was actually story and that it linked really well with the mechanics in the card design. It was a point where we saw finally that the Gatewatch, which had been all-conquering before, could actually lose. And it included lots of character development that didn't rely upon really clumsy and outrageous retcons. It was also a period when Standard wasn't broken, when there weren't loads of overpowered cards, and when there weren't banning after bannings. There was also lots of play. As she points out, this is a period where there was Friday Night Magic, store championships, games days, pro tours, and even coverage of the Grand Prix. So there was very much a feeling of being involved in competitive Magic because there was always something to aspire to. Talking of aspiring, it was even back in an era when going along to a games day meant that you could get a full art foil card. And that was something genuinely special. Now, of course, a altered art or extended art foil card is something that turns up in boosters and ends up in chaff. Not so special. She, in her article, draws parallels with Tolkien's view of Middle-earth and how on a slow and gradual decline people can look back on the good times and feel nostalgic for them, tending to forget any of the shortcomings of that previous time, whilst at the same time working hard just to make today a little bit better. And she draws those parallels out into the modern world, pointing out that whilst we feel nostalgia, you can never go back because yesterday is not as it was. Talking of things we can't do, it seems that Wizards can't print decent lands within Standard. Jim Davis over at Cool Stuff Inc. is taking a look into that and at the impact that that has to the game, explaining why the incessant printing of tap lands makes Standard a stagnant game and how it boosts the already powerful mid-range decks. He looks at the various turn 1 mana fixing lands that are available, be that shock lands like Steam Vents or pain lands like Caves of Koilos, and most of all he looks at the fast lands such as Inspiring Vantage. And he makes a very good, sound argument as to why those fast lands should be reprinted each year in the core release. At least Jim's not asking to break the seemingly ultimate taboo for Wizards of reprinting fetch lands in Standard. Whereas DougY, or DougY, over at EDH Rec, is proposing more land removal within Commander. Now, of course, this is a very contentious subject for Commander players, particularly at the casual tables. But what Doug does is he takes a look at an older deck that he played and extends it out to look at land removal. He's explaining why he does it, when he would do it, and specifically what he would exclude from that look. And as a result, he gives us a top 10 of land removal cards and how and when they should be played. Not content with that, he then follows it up with 18 honourable mentions. Now personally, I'm all in favour of land removal in Commander as an answer to Green's land ramp. But it's very much one of those things which seems to depend on the social contract. So it's not written in stone. What is very much etched in stone, on the other hand, is the reserve list. And Cassie LaBelle over at TCG Player takes a look at the reserve list, why the discussion has come round to it yet again, why the prices are spiking yet again. But then she makes the assumption that the reserve list isn't going to go away, and she examines the so what of that. Cassie looks at why cards on the reserve list are spiking, and she points the finger at Wizards of the Coast and its reprint policy. When Wizards does a serious number of reprints, the price of cards on the reserve list spikes, and they've certainly done that this year. In Double Masters alone, there were 79 reprints that had been reprinted already since Christmas. Cassie goes on to take a look at the difference between genuine price rises and misleading spikes, and how the impact of targeted buyouts work, and explains the mechanism so that you can understand this. Now, it's a very good article. There's very good advice in there about how to overcome things like the fear of missing out and identify cards and whether their value is in their collectability or their playability. And if you're in that middle of that Venn diagram where you have a collectible and playable card, how basically its price is going to stay high. Most importantly, in her fifth part of the article, and it is quite a lengthy article, takes about half an hour to read, in the fifth part of the article, she's taking a look at why in reality the reserve list doesn't impact most players. Why actually taking the ban list away could actually harm formats like Legacy, when maybe sort of 5 or 6 years ago it would have helped them. She also goes on to very clearly distinguish between the perils of the reserve list and the impact that the secondary market is having, and how Wizards' reprint policy is very much designed to stimulate that secondary market so that the prices are high enough so that when they then reprint a card, it gives increased value in the boosters and sells the boosters. It's a really good, well analysed article, which, to be fair, is what we've come to expect from Cassie, and therefore I highly recommend it as my favourite article of this week. So that just about wraps it up for this week. If you like what you've seen, please hit the thumbs up button and consider subscribing, and I'll try to get back next week to give an update on what I suspect is going to be a slightly more Commander heavy week. But until then, happy reading.